Thanks so much for joining us here on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bianchi, and today we're joined by 9 News parenting expert and mental health expert, Dr. Sheryl Ziegler, for more on May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we're going to have a bit more on some tips, some kind of day-to-day things that hopefully you out there can use to improve your mental health and make it better. So Dr. Ziegler, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to talk about mental health and Mental Health Awareness Month.
And starting off, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, as we mentioned. Maybe not something that everyone knows. So could you give us a bit of a top-line idea about what it is and also maybe what it means to you?
Yeah. So Mental Health Awareness Month is really created to bring awareness to the community around mental health needs, as well as destigmatizing mental health. And so we have really come a very long way, even just in the last 10 years, around openly talking about things like depression and anxiety, postpartum depression, things that are really affecting many people, our colleagues, our coworkers, our family members, that in the past was something people kept secret and felt shame around. And I think now we're actually seeing what we're breaking down that system and we're destigmatizing. And so that's really what this month is about, is just continuing this conversation.
That actually leads to something I was going to ask you a little later on, but anecdotally, it does feel like mental health awareness is really in the last 5-10 years has really, a lot of those stereotypes have been broken down. What do you attribute that to, and how can we leverage a lot of that increased spotlight in mental health awareness to improve mental health in the next few years as well?
It's a great question, and although I can't pinpoint maybe one particular person, I think part of it has been some really high-profile people coming out and talking about their struggles. So when you have, whether it's celebrities, sports stars, CEOs of companies coming out and talking about their depression or maybe their suicide attempt or things like that, and all of a sudden people go, oh, if it can happen to that person, then yeah, it's happening to me, or it's okay, or they're talking about it, they're still a powerful person, people still respect them. So I will say one of the things that I think has been really shifting in the conversation is just high profile people being really honest and open, not just about the topic, not like as a spokesperson, but actually as their lived experience is shared. I think that breaks down barriers like nothing else. No public service announcement can break down a barrier like someone important or who you idolize saying, I've struggled with this. And this is what I've done, or this is where I've struggled. And so I think, one of the big high-profile people that I think about is Selena Gomez. There's a lot of those kind of they have a younger following. So when I think about her, there's somebody else around that age to me. But like when these kinds of younger pop stars are talking about their struggles, what happens is now you have a younger generation that, let's say that was 8 years ago. Well, now they are either young adults or they're older teens, and so they've been raised. It's really this like an older generation that's still struggling sometimes with destigmatization. Kids talk about these things openly. Teens talk about it very openly. Oh, my therapist said this, and what do you think about that? And so it's really exciting because it's actually even generational differences in how we've progressed.
That's actually something, again, I've also noticed as well. Again, you're the expert. I'm saying this purely anecdotally to be clear.
You're in the media, so you see these trends.
Absolutely, and I do think that it is a generational thing where our parents' generation may have been a bit more apprehensive about seeking a therapist. There was a bit of a stigma associated with that. I kind of think back to even the show The Sopranos from the late 90s, where even seeing a therapist there was kind of this almost weird thing back in the day.
Yes.
Now it's a very normal thing and increasing. With that in mind, that's maybe therapist, psychologist. What is it, maybe one, and this is probably a tough question, one simple thing that everybody can do each day to improve their mental health?
That is a great question. Before I say the one tip,
yes.
One thing that they can be honest about is your family history. So something that has also changed over the last, like in my career, so like over the last 20 years, is we now know the genetic implications. We now understand the brain so much more, and we have so much more to learn, but we understand that if you have a family history of depression, that you are more likely, you are more susceptible. We know that this isn't just personality or temperament or you're weak or you're not tough enough. There's such strong genetics involved. So the field of epigenetics has even gotten so much bigger. So the first thing I would say before a tip is be really honest or inquire, get curious about the family history. Most people's family history includes, oh yeah, I think back in the 1950s there was a psych hospitalization, an aunt, a great aunt. Like people start going back and they start seeing this lineage. And again, in the 1950s, if you had what they would call a mental breakdown, you might go to a psych hospital, a psychiatric hospitalization. Those were things that were very hush-hush. So what I'm saying is if you just get a little curious, you will find some history. And maybe it's you find very healthy history, but just be honest about your history. And then my tip would be, there's a lot of things, but one of the things that we know and that we saw in the pandemic was really social connection. It's probably the number one tip for maintaining your mental health. Without meaningful social connection, people get lonely. People then don't have anything to do with their feelings. You are more likely to have a stroke. You're more likely to have physical disability and mental disability. So the number one tip really is get connected with people and understand that there's different levels of connection. So even if you say, well, I don't have like a confidant or a best friend. Some people will say that. Okay, well at work then feel connected. Feel like you're making a difference. Take those connections maybe outside of work. Hey, do you want to grab lunch? Do you want to do something? So it's really important that that's really our emphasis, and that's what we saw in the pandemic. The reason why we are in a state of emergency in pediatric mental health was disconnecting kids from their school routines, from their teachers, from their peers. And when they lost that connection and they were isolated, their mental health really deteriorated. And so that would be my number one tip.
Okay, so social connections. So go out there, make a friend,
Yes.
send a text or something like that today.
Yes,
Or
connect with somebody, make a new friend. And I tell people, build it. If you don't have it, you just say, I don't have a village. I don't have friends. Build it, they will come. There are literally, we have a loneliness epidemic in the country right now. And that was before the pandemic. So it's really important that people are saying, well, if I don't have somebody, then I'll make it. I'll create a book club. I'll create a cooking club. I'll create a hiking club, whatever it is. And people will come. I promise people will come because everybody really wants to be connected. Most people do, the vast majority. But they sometimes just don't know how to or don't have it.
interesting. Can I go back to the family history thing for a quick
Yeah.
second? Let's say you discover that's the case. What do you do? Is it something that for more conscious awareness, or is it something that you act on?
So that's a great question. The first step is awareness, right? It's so interesting because I do this with people. So sometimes people will come in and maybe something's going on with their younger child. And, maybe it is like a more clinical depression, something. So then I'll start with them, of course, as parents. Okay, well, what's your mental health history? And then they may be like, oh, I had this little bout with this or had this. Okay, now tell me about your parents. Oh, my mother, she's had anxiety, I think her whole entire life. Oh, really? What about, my grandmother? And, so it's like all of a sudden, then when we talk about it, they'll say, well, does that get passed down? Because people think that's just a temperament. People are anxious, right? Or people are cynical, because cynicism and getting negative can be a real component of depression. And so first it's awareness. Just the awareness alone, you go, oh my gosh, yeah, this does run in my family and your family or whatever. That's piece one. And then the second piece is, if you know you have a predisposition, I'm picking on depression and anxiety because they're the two most commonly diagnosed conditions, but there are other things. There's OCD, there's phobias, those kinds of issues as well, bipolar depression. When you know that you have a family history, then you become more hypervigilant. Just like if you knew heart disease ran in your family, right? There are many people who say, oh, all the men in my family have had a heart attack at 50. Well, what do? They watch their cholesterol, they exercise, right? They usually live healthier lifestyles because they know, I have a really good chance that this could happen to me. It's the same thing with mental health. Depression, anxiety, any sort of mental illness runs in your family, then you're at higher predisposition. So you have to manage your stress. You have to take care of yourself. Like there's been this interesting debate about the term self-care. And I say, I use it sometimes, but I actually try not to use it too much because people have this impression that self-care is like, go take a bubble bath and get a massage and go get a manicure, pedicure or something. And that's not really it. I look at it as health. We're just talking about our overall health. And so I would say, and the way I try to be with people is, let's talk about your health history. So heart health, respiratory conditions, allergies, mental health, depression, anxiety. That once we start, and I think this is the next wave of where we are, where we're going, is where we really start looking at health as a continuum. and physical and mental health are components on the continuum on the same level. If you really look at a lot of physical health conditions, they manifest out of mental health conditions. And so we are understanding that so much more. So I think the more that our society can really understand that this is all just health, they'll say, oh yes, depression runs in my family, and they'll just say it like that, right? Just like, oh, heart disease runs in my family, well, depression runs in my family. And so I'm really aware to do things like taking walks, exercising, eating well, meditating, staying hydrated, being socially connected, journaling, having a gratitude practice. These are all things that they might sound like nice and luxuries, but they all have science behind it that really contribute to positive mental health.
That's kind of encouraging in a sense there,
Yeah.
that if you are aware of it, that you can take a lot of those actions that you really need to take to improve your mental health on that end. Now, with that in mind, there's also a lot of great mental health resources out there, but maybe for the average person might feel a little overwhelming. There's so many resources out there. Any great ones here in Colorado and Denver, perhaps, that maybe people don't know about that you would recommend?
So there's one that has been born out of the pandemic that I really love to shine a light on, which is I Matter, imatter.org. And so what that is I'm not associated with it, but all I know about it is in the state of Colorado now, you can get a mental health assessment and I think 3 free sessions. And it's really geared toward youth, so tweens and teens. Here in the state of Colorado, you can receive those kind of mental health services starting at age 12, even without parental consent. So age of consent is 12.
Wow.
I know. It's not like that everywhere in the country.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So here, I think part of that move was around just trying to break down barriers to treatment. And of course, when it's free, that's possible. When it requires health insurance and payments, that's not possible. But and so I think that's really a great resource. I've been seeing signs up around. They have a website. It's a great way. I think you can probably access it on an app. So it's a great way to get at least youth and teens involved in just even getting an assessment and getting started. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing that I would say is during the pandemic, we saw these major increases in like calling the Colorado Crisis Hotline. And so you can do that. There's a way to text it. There's a way to call it. And so I think utilizing those resources when needed, do that. And I think the other thing that is important is a reminder around Safe to Tell. And so Safe to Tell also you can call in if you're concerned about yourself, you're concerned about somebody else. The kinds of issues that you see around for school-age children, they have a place to go. So those are some of the resources that I really love. And I love that you mentioned resources because I think when people are going through things, they also, tend to go online. And I see this a lot. People are self-diagnosing. And so,
Done that.
Yep, I think everybody's done that, right, in different ways. So I would just say, really look to trusted resources. If it's your physical health, look to places like, Mayo or Cleveland Clinic, or just call your own doctor. I mean, we all do it. We go online. I think I have this. But I think, on the mental health side of things, there's lots out there. But really look for things like, the American Academy of Pediatrics, or they have like American Society of, anxiety disorders. Look for larger kind of organizations to give you some clues. And if somebody's feeling like they could use some help or seek treatment, just seek treatment. Especially with anxiety disorders. It is the most commonly diagnosed disorder in our country, and it's actually one of the most treatable. But stats say like anywhere between 35 to 40% of people seek treatment. So that's like over half of people don't seek treatment for something that's really quite treatable and not even very long term usually. And it's so incredibly accessible to get kind of the tools that you need for a panic disorder or a generalized anxiety or, maybe a specified anxiety. And so I just really encourage people to go seek treatment out.
Okay, so go seek treatment. I suppose before we kind of wrap on up, any final thoughts on Mental Health Awareness Month here in the month of May?
Well, I've said it a lot, but I'll say it again. Anxiety is the most commonly diagnosed psychiatric condition in our country. 50% of the time, you also have depression. And depression is right behind it. So they're really both quite prevalent. So we are talking in terms of about 1 in 5 people have some sort of diagnosable mental health condition. That's a lot of people. those are stats that are higher than some things like even diabetes, or there's things that get a lot of attention, but mental health is really so incredibly prevalent. So I think the more we can talk about it, the more parents can realize that their kids are very open to talking about it. You don't need to hide if something's going on. I just think the more that we're open about it, that's how real change is going to continue on and going into the future.
Knock on wood, that continues to happen. Hopefully,
Yes.
this helps you out there, as well as imatter.org, is it?
I believe it's .org, yeah.
imatter.org. We'll check that for you,
Yep.
and then Safe to Tell some of those resources as well. So.
Yep, absolutely.
So Dr. Sheryl Ziegler, thanks so much for your time here and for joining us here on 9 News Plus for a really important conversation that, yes, that's in part because of May being Mental Health Awareness Month, but this is one we can obviously carry forward.
Year round, but I'm so glad that you're shining a light on it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.